All right, hello everyone. This is Pastor Patrick again with another baking stream. Now, because it's Thanksgiving week and everyone and their brother is making pumpkin pie, I can't bring you the recipe you probably want. So it's going to have to wait till next week, and that's okay. But today I'm going to give you something that's very simple. You probably have the ingredients in your pantry, but it has a little bit of work with it. And that is from the land of Anglo-Saxons that we live in this area. You know, the Scottish, English, Irish, all do a form of shortbread. So I've been playing with the shortbread recipe. Specifically, I'm going to be working with a recipe here by King Arthur, where I'll be doing a few different tweaks here and there with my own recipe. But I'm going to have the ingredients here for you. So first off, this is for one batch, just a 8 by 8 inch square dish. And it'll make a couple dozen, maybe 1 dozen, 18, somewhere in there. It all depends on how you cut them. You'll get to see what mine looks like. Just a friendly reminder, I'll do unsalted butter because I'm doing salt differently in this recipe. I measured out my flour in corps of grams, but if you want to use it by a measure cup, that's fine. The only thing that you could decide not to do is almond extract. I add a little bit of mine just because it kind of helps the butteriness come out. Otherwise, I would just stick with just the vanilla, and that's okay. So I have a list of the things that you'll be doing. You'll watch the video here, but I'll have these ingredients in directions in the description of the video as well. So feel free just to peruse there. And let's go ahead and get into the video. So we'll go ahead and get over there. All right, so I have the powdered sugar and the butter already in the bowl. And what we're going to do is just basically whip it until it gets into a nice consistency. This one's a little bit different because it's powdered sugar. Powdered sugar actually has a little bit of cornstarch in there, so it naturally will try not to cake until you actually add a liquid. So it'll be a minute or so before we really get that worked in. Really, I have the softened butter that's been sitting out overnight and getting that worked in with the powdered sugar. Again, what I like to do is get the stick of butter already incorporated into a whipped fashion and then add my sugar, but because of the video, we're going to do it everything together at once. I already have the flour measured out in my green bowl, and then I have both extracts as well. So a few different things that you may want to go ahead and get ready for it. It is a little bit on the lower end temperature-wise. It's going to be at 300 in the oven this time, so that's going to be a little on the lighter side, mainly because you don't want it to brown fast. You want it to kind of slowly bake, and that's a way to do that, is to do it on a slow temperature, and one that will take a little while, which is why this recipe doesn't do 10 minutes and everything. So now I'm going to start adding the extracts because I've gotten it into a pretty good mold where everything looks the same. I'm going to add 1 teaspoon. Mine does naturally do 1 teaspoon with a cap, so not all of them do. And then what I do with the almond extract, just because I'm doing a couple drops, is what I'll do is I'll pour a little bit into the cap, and then I can use the cap and slowly drip it in. Just in case for some reason it decides to just all come at once, I'm not doing the whole container, I'm just doing the cap worth. I've had that happen. That's why I do that. So I just did a couple drops, the rest goes back in the container. Of course, again, you can ignore that one altogether if you want. I like that little bit of zing in there. So we're going to add that in and whip it in, because what it will actually end up doing is incorporating that cornstarch in the powdered sugar so that it becomes a paste. It's a lot easier to work with when it has actually a little bit of liquid that's not from the butter. Naturally, when we make butter, we take that liquid out. So this is why it's really nice to kind of get that incorporated. Once I give it a good hard zhuzh and work there, what I'll do then is I'll slowly add in the flour. Ideally, if it wasn't a video, what I would probably end up doing is actually doing it in pieces. So I'll actually incorporate about half of it first, then get it worked in, then add the next half, and just slowly kind of get incorporated. But again, this is what we're dealing with. As you can see, it's pretty well whipped. It's not lumping at all, but when we add the flour, it's going to do that. So again, this is a fairly simple one that it's 3 main ingredients with a couple flavorings here and there. So this is something that you could naturally make in a pinch. that you wanted to hurry up and make something, but you don't have a lot in the pantry. This is a nice one to have during the holiday season. So, think about this in a couple days. If you're having to think, I need a dessert and I don't have pumpkin, I don't have pecans, I don't have corn syrup, I don't have this or that, but I do have these 3 ingredients, you could probably make shortbreads, and that would be a nice addition to the meals and the holiday season. So again, I'm going to be slowly working in the flour here. So it's just going to get it into basically what I call a sand texture. So it's going to be lightly tan. For the most part, it won't be too crumbly, but it'll be a little bit. What I then end up doing, once we get that incorporated, which for the most part it is I'll go ahead and use the bowl that I already have, add a little bit of water to it, and then I'll slowly add in a little bit of water. I don't want to add too much because you can't take it out if you do too much. So that's what I do instead, is I do it just a little bit, get it worked in, and actually I don't even have to add after this. This was actually well incorporated on its own with the amount that I added. So what we're going to do is get that nice and incorporated to where it starts to clump. And actually what will happen with me today is it'll clump around one of the mixers, which tells me it's done. That tells me, okay, I can go ahead and get this worked. And the fastest way for me to do that is to ram it all the way up to the full speed, and it flies it off the piece. And this is a nice test. So you do a test. Does it hold together if I clump it together? It does. So that's exactly what I want with my shortbread. I'll go ahead and get rid of some of the ingredients here, or the couple of the bowls and dishes and things like that. That'll be cleaned later. What I like to do also is, because it's a square container, I'd like to do an 8" by 8". Is I'll do 2 pieces of parchment paper. It's normally just one cut, and then I'll cut it in half and then crumble it up like I just showed you, and then it'll easily flatten down that way. It won't decide to kind of curl on itself, because I've already broken its natural state that it wanted to be in. What I'll then do is go ahead and wipe down the bowl completely to get all the ingredients, make sure everything's nice and incorporated, and then I'll put it in the container, and then I'll use my hands. Now, my hands are sometimes on the warmer side. Luckily, when I was doing this, mine were fairly cold. If you have a habit of doing that, what you could do is put down some cling film over the top of it, saran wrap, stuff like that, and use that as a barrier between you and the dough. And then what you want to do is you want to try to incorporate it into basically a mass, but you also want to try and get it to where it's flat and even in their height. I could have done this on the board and done with a rolling pin. You can do that, but for the course of just making one batch like this, which is fairly small, I just do it with my hands. And also, this is just going to the Herder Berman family. We don't mind too much that it doesn't look all that fancy. Of course, if you're doing it as a gift or something like that, of course, you want to try and make it look as nice as it could. But for the course of this video, this is the base level what you're doing. So I get it lightly incorporated, and what I'll do, sometimes we'll do, is I'll layer the baking paper on top of it and use that as a barrier to just kind of push everything evenly. Then I'll get it to a nice even mass, and that's what it starts to look like. It kind of looks like sugar cookie dough, and it's a little bit different just because of the ingredient mix, but everything's well put together. It's not starting to separate, which is something you want to worry about. So I'll go ahead and finally get rid of a few more things. Actually, right now I'm washing my hands because I want to get dough and the liquid anywhere else. Because, again, butter in here is going to be fairly well incorporated. So I want to make sure that that's getting well incorporated. So what I'll then do is, if you notice, I have a fork and I have a container here for my salt. What I'll then do is start working on the top of it. Basically, right now, I can make one massive shortbread. Or what I can do is use a fork to start making indentations. What it does is it actually helps the cookie of the shortbread to cook more evenly. Because the heat gets inside those holes, it then incorporates that heat and allows for it to have more of an even bake. Normally, if you just have it one full mass, it'll start cooking a lot more on the edges than it would in the middle. So this is a way to try and incorporate that heat throughout the whole piece. So it's super helpful for that. Finally, you get salt. Now, in the recipe with King Arthur flour, it puts the salt in the dough. I like doing it on the outside because then when you take a bite of it, that salt hits your mouth first, and then you get the buttery, sweet sugar cookie of a shortbread. So it's a nice way to kind of give it an interesting flavor. So that's my little take on a difference there. Of course, everyone has their own little recipe that does something different. Finally, it's going in the oven, 300 degrees for about 30 minutes. Normally at about 28 minutes, I kind of hang out by the oven and check it and peruse it. What will then happen is I did a little cleaning in the process and got things incorporated here. Now I'll bring out the shortbreads with you, and here they are back. Notice the corners are just starting to brown, which is where you want, because you want that nice even golden color. So the nice thing with the baking paper is with those 4 sides is you have something very easy to be able to pull from. Now you can pull from both sides and then move it, or you can kind of do what I do. You can do it that way, or I just do a slide. But you basically pulling the sheet away, and it's a nice easy way for it to flatten off, and it doesn't mess up the middle as much. So now I have those 4 slides. What I did is push those down. It's still warm, and that is the thing that you definitely want to make sure you do, is you want to make sure that it's still warm when you cut them, because when they're cool, they'll crumble on you. So if you do it now while it's still warm, as it cools and starts to harden, then it's already in the form that it wants to be, that you want it to be in. So what I'm doing now is just making simple squares, and I'll have some corners that I'll probably nibble on here in this afternoon, evening. So that's basically shortbreads. Fairly simple. Again, got to do a taste test. It's pretty good. And finally, I'm going to show you, what that texture looks like on the inside. Notice it's crumbled on the one side, and it's being a little bit on the brown side, which is where you want. And it's fully the whole way through. Try to keep it the same even line. Otherwise, that is today's baking stream. So thank you again for coming and joining me with me today. And I'll have another one up here next week for our pumpkin ginger cookies. I promise. I just have to get pumpkin after Thanksgiving. So I'll have that hopefully here for you this weekend. Otherwise, happy baking, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.